Hello and welcome to Nature Knowledge. This is a speaker series with experts sharing scientific knowledge on current issues affecting nature in Florida. I'm your host, Dr. Shelly Johnson, State Specialized Agent in Natural Resources with University of Florida IFAS Extension. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm really excited for this topic today, genetically modified mosquitoes in Florida. Our guest speaker for today is Dr. Eva Buckner. She's an assistant professor and a state extension specialist with the UF IFAS Florida Medical Entomology Laboratory. So welcome, Dr. Buckner, and I'm going to go ahead and let you take over from here for the next while.
All right, well, thank you so much, Shelly, for this opportunity to talk about this subject, and I'm glad we have so many people interested in learning about it. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Give me just a moment. Okay, so let's dive right in. So this presentation is going to focus on genetically modified mosquitoes that are being released in Florida. First, I'm going to provide some background information, and then I'm going to go over some commonly asked questions and provide their answers. And then at the end, you'll be able to ask questions that may not have already been answered. So the place to start is by talking about the yellow fever mosquito, Aedes aegypti. What I want to point out is that worldwide, there are over 3,500 species of mosquitoes. We actually have 90 species, approximately 90 species in Florida. And so the mosquitoes that are being released, the genetically modified mosquitoes, this is just one species of mosquito that's being genetically modified and released in the Florida Keys. So, and it is the yellow fever mosquito. So I'd like to tell you about this mosquito. As I said, its common name is yellow fever mosquito. You might sometimes hear it called the dinghy mosquito. It's an invasive species. It's a vector of multiple viruses that cause illnesses in humans: Dinghy virus, chikungunya virus, Malaria virus, yellow fever virus, and Zika virus. It's found across the world in tropical, subtropical, and temperate regions. When they talk about mosquitoes and how many different species there are, they have different biologies. And this mosquito, you're not going to find it in nice natural water habitats as immatures. You're going to find it living close to humans. And so it takes the females, only the females, for any species of mosquito, take blood meals. Actually, some mosquito species don't take any blood meals, but so for this, only the yellow fever mosquito females take blood meals, and then the males feed on nectar. They do not bite people. As I said, you'll find them living close to people, and they use our containers we might have around our house that fill with water as their larval habitats, their immature habitats, and have a short flight range. So this is just a quick image of the yellow fever life cycle. I just wanted to show you that it has the egg, larva, pupa, and adult mosquito as part of the life cycle. And so the eggs need water to hatch, and the larval, like I said, these, you're not going to find this species in nice lakes or ponds. This is the type of habitats, aquatic habitats, where you're going to find these mosquitoes, this mosquito, the yellow fever mosquito. So you're going to be finding it in items around our homes that may fill with water, so tires, rain barrels that maybe don't have a screen on them, buckets, bird baths, bromeliads, the saucers underneath pots. Those are just some examples. So I've given some information about the biology. Now I want to talk about the public health importance of the yellow fever mosquito. And I'm going to just focus on Dinghy virus. As I said, this mosquito is the primary vector of many viruses that cause illnesses in humans. And I will focus on dengue because it is the most important mosquito-borne virus affecting humans worldwide. But just know that this is not only, it's not just because of this virus that this species has negative public health consequences. So Dinghy virus causes causes dengue and severe dengue. Worldwide, there are approximately 50 to 400 million infections per year. That's most likely an underestimation. One recent estimate was actually more than that. And as you can see, due to this virus, illnesses caused by this virus, there could be over 20,000 deaths per year. Here you can see the virus transmission cycle. A female bites an infected person, the mosquito becomes infected, and then the mosquito can pass it on to additional people. Dinghy fever, it is also sometimes called breakbone fever. It is, as you can imagine, given the name, not going to be as severe as the symptoms associated with severe dengue fever. But here you can see some of the symptoms associated with this illness. And these are the symptoms that are associated with severe dengue fever. And 5% of this dengue fever cases are going to develop into severe dengue fever. And if you've had dengue in the past, you're more likely to develop severe dengue. And you can see listed here some of the symptoms associated with this, but it can result in shock, internal bleeding, and even death. And in general, children are going to have more severe symptoms, and it's the leading cause of serious illness and death among children in some Asian and Latin American countries. So let's talk about dengue here in Florida. There is a risk of dengue virus transmission wherever the yellow fever mosquito, Aedes aegypti, is present. And I am focusing on Florida because that's where I'm at, and so and the distribution of Aedes aegypti, yellow fever mosquito, does include Monroe County in Florida, which are the Florida Keys. So just to kind of give you some background information about dengue in Florida, there were outbreaks regularly prior to the 1940s. For example, there was an epidemic in 1930 to 1935 that caused 15,000 cases. More recently, there was an outbreak in 2009 to 2010 where there were 93 human cases. The 91 out of those 93 cases were in the Florida Keys. There was an outbreak in Martin County in 2013 with 30 cases. And then in 2020, there was an outbreak in Monroe and Miami-Dade counties with 70 cases. 67 of the 70 were in the Florida Keys. You may be noticing a trend here. And then in years where we don't have outbreaks, there can be 10 or less sporadic cases of dengue in Florida. So far this year, luckily we haven't had any cases. So very happy about that, and crossing my fingers that that'll continue. Why should we explore GM mosquitoes as a control tool? So I've just spent time talking about the public health importance of Aedes aegypti, the yellow fever mosquito. It makes up only 4% of the mosquito population in the Keys, but it's responsible for causing virtually all the mosquito-borne diseases transmitted to humans. So GM mosquitoes, they are, the reason this is being explored as a control tool is to help with the fight to control mosquitoes that transmit pathogens that cause diseases. And one of the ways that we have typically used to control mosquitoes is going to be using insecticides. Unfortunately, resistance to common insecticides has become more common in certain mosquito species, one of them being the yellow fever mosquito. One of the things that my lab researches is actually resistance in vectors of human arboviruses in Florida populations of mosquitoes. And so we look at resistance in the yellow fever mosquito, the Asian tiger mosquito, and also the southern house mosquito. And what we found is that there is resistance, at least to a certain level, in all of the Florida populations that have been assayed of the yellow fever mosquito. So really it's, GM mosquitoes are not meant or designed to replace any of the currently used mosquito control strategies. It's just a tool to potentially help supplement those mosquito control strategies, because the best program is going to be one that utilizes integrated pest management. So using multiple tools, trying to kill the mosquito at different life stages. So trying to kill the mosquito when it's in the aquatic stage, where it's much easier to kill. Instead of an adult that's flying around, it's confined in a container as in the larval stage. And then what I can tell you is that the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District, they do use IPM to try to control mosquitoes, and they do an excellent job. They use communication to their residents to try and get residents to help control or dump out containers to reduce the larval habitats. They use larvicides, they use biological control, and then if necessary, they do use adulticides. So they are using all of these tools. But as I just talked about, even with utilizing all those tools, there were still 67 cases of dengue fever in the Florida Keys last year. So this is just an additional tool to potentially help supplement what we're doing right now. So let's talk about what's happening in the Florida Keys. So there's going to be 2 pilot projects, or they're actually taking place right now, involving the release of genetically modified mosquitoes. And this is through a collaboration with the company Oxitec in the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District. Here you can see a little bit about Oxitec. They have been working on self-limiting mosquito technologies since the early 2000s, and they have released transgenic mosquitoes in other areas. So what is a genetically modified mosquito? So it's going to be a mosquito that's had its genome altered to make it useful for reducing population size and or controlling the spread of mosquito transmitted pathogens. So what GM mosquitoes are being used in the Florida Keys pilot projects. So as I've said, it's only one species that's being has been genetically modified and is going to be released. And Oxitec has come up with this term for it, or this, I guess, name for it, and they call it their friendly strain of yellow fever mosquitoes. And that's because they call it that because the females die before reaching adulthood, and those are the ones that bite humans. So they're friendly because they're not going to bite humans. The male mosquitoes don't bite and they live fine into adulthood. Let's talk about the genetic modifications that have been made to the Oxitec mosquitoes. So there's been 2 genes that have been added to the genome. The first one is just a color marker for easy visualization, and it's detectable in most all of the life stages of the mosquito, and it just allows researchers to tell the difference between a wild yellow fever mosquito and a genetically modified mosquito under the fluorescent microscope. So that is one of the genes that's been added to the genome. Let's talk about the second one. The second one is a self-limiting factor. It's called, the gene is called TTAV. And the reason is that it's called a self-limiting factor is that it causes females for specific mortality. And so the female mosquitoes die before pupation. And the way this happens is that it stops essential proteins from being produced within the females that are needed for the additional life stages. The male mosquitoes do possess this, this gene, but they're not affected. And so what happens is that males mate with wild mosquitoes, they pass on the gene to offspring, and then the female offspring do not survive. So the way that the genetically modified mosquitoes are being released in these pilot projects is, you may have, in some cases, sometimes the adults are released from containers. In other trials that have taken place, for example, in California. But in this case, what is happening is these little plastic boxes are put out in locations, and a capsule of the genetically modified mosquito eggs is added to the box, water is added, and the adult male mosquitoes go through the life cycle, and then only male mosquitoes emerge from here. And so that is how these mosquitoes are being released in the pilot projects. Now I'm going to give you some details about the 2 different pilot projects that are currently taking place. the first one is called Project A, and it has single point releases. So what that means is that there's just one of those boxes that I showed in the previous slide being put in small areas. And they're just trying to see what is the effectiveness of just placing one of these boxes in one area. So with this, it's going to be one box placed in, they're doing it in 9 small areas. And this is the trial is going to take place over 12 weeks. Again, I like to always point out, this is just in the Florida Keys that this is taking place. And this pilot project had actually started in June, but they had to restart it due to Tropical Elsa. It was restarted about mid-July, and fewer than 12,000 mosquitoes will be emerging per week across all areas. Again, that's just male mosquitoes that do not bite. So Project B is looking at the effects on the population in multiple point releases. So as you can see here in this image, there's going to be a small number of the devices placed in an area in 6 different areas. And this is going to be a longer trial. It's going to last 16 weeks. And so it's to evaluate the effectiveness in larger areas. And this is taking place in 6 locations in the Middle Keys. There's 2 on Vega Key, 2 on Little Torch Key, 1 on Conch Key, and 1 on Ramrod Key. And there's approximately 50 boxes total split between the 6 locations. And throughout all the release locations, less than 200,000 male mosquitoes are expected to emerge each week. And then the effect of the population suppression, that's going to be compared to an area where there's no treatment taking place, or I should say where normal non-release of the genetically modified mosquitoes is taking place. Of course, there's still going to be larviciding and other mosquito control techniques being utilized. And so that is going to be compared with the populations on Key Colony Beach, Summerlin Key, and Little Torch Key. What is the intended outcome of the release of genetically modified mosquito? And I feel like you guys covered all of this, and when you answered that question in the chat, you guys nailed it. So yes, the goal is to reduce the local mosquito population. It's to reduce the need for insecticide applications for mosquitoes, and yes, reduce mosquito-borne disease risk. This slide shows how the population is going to be reduced. So initially, the GM male mosquitoes are released into nature. They mate with wild females. And so here on this diagram, it starts out here on the left side, there's the darker mosquitoes, which is the wild mosquitoes. There's more of them because in the wild mosquito population, but then the male mosquitoes that are genetically modified male mosquitoes that are released, they start mating with the wild females. The matings produce eggs. The larvae hatch from eggs. The females die, only the males survive. And then this happens again, they mate with more females. And what happens is that over time, the number of the wild type mosquitoes in the populations decline. But due to that self-limiting gene that's added to them, they don't persist in nature. As I said earlier, this technology has been investigated in additional areas by Oxitec. And here you can see what some of the population suppression results were. So here you can see in Grand Cayman, the wild yellow fever mosquito was released. The wild yellow fever mosquito population was reduced by 96%. In Brazil, multiple trials were conducted there, and you can see that they were reduced by over 90%. And so this is looking at the effect on the mosquito populations. Certainly the intent is also going to be to reduce dengue virus transmission or the transmission of other viruses transmitted by the yellow fever mosquito in the released area, but there's no, at the moment, currently no peer reviewed studies on this, but that is also a goal, as we talked about. And based on these past results, we're hopefully going to see 92 to 96% population suppression in these areas. So one of the questions that is asked a lot, I feel like, is can bites from the genetically modified mosquitoes that are being released, can they make people sick? And that's a valid concern, and the answer is no. And that's because only adult male mosquitoes are being released. They're not capable of biting people or animals. And in fact, this is something you may not know, they feed on nectar and other sources of sugar and may even play a role in pollination. Another question that is asked a lot is that, will the release of these genetically modified mosquitoes have a negative impact on the ecosystem? And this is not likely, due to the fact that the yellow fever mosquito is not a natural part of the food chain in Florida. So it was actually introduced into the United States several hundred years ago during the slave trade. And the reason that I focused on telling you about the type of aquatic habitats where you can find the immature yellow fever mosquito is because I want you to think about what the food web might be in these containers compared to a lake. So if you think about the food web in a cup or some type of plastic toy that got discarded that's filled up with water, that food web is so much less complex than the food web in, say, a pond or a lake. And so, no, there's no animal that relies solely on the yellow fever mosquito as a food source, whether it's in the immature phase or as the adult life stage. Yeah, there are going to be some animals that may feed on mosquitoes, but they also feed on other insects too. And if there's fewer yellow fever mosquitoes, the animals are going to eat other insects. And changes into DNA, including genetic mutations, are natural occurrence in all organisms, including animals and humans, and so the GM mosquitoes, they do have genes introduced into their genomes, but there is no existing pathway for any of the engineered genes to be transmitted to other animals. And because of the self-limiting gene that is added to them, it even further minimizes that risk that the genes from these mosquitoes are going to be transmitted to other organisms. So let's say you're not in the Florida Keys and you're not in an area where the Oxitec-friendly yellow fever mosquitoes are being released. What can you do to reduce mosquitoes around your home? So go around your house and see if you have any containers that might be serving as larval habitats for this mosquito species, as well as other mosquitoes species that like to use that have become dependent on humans for their larval habitats. Go around and dump them. And also for those areas that or those containers that might be holding water that can't be dumped, there are options. You can use mosquito dunks or mosquito bits that can be put in those containers. The mosquito dunks and mosquito bits, they actually contain BTI, which is just a bacteria that's very specific to just mosquitoes and midges. So the only species or the only organisms that it's going to kill are mosquitoes and midges. You can also use these mosquito bits in bromeliads, or you can, if you don't want to do that, you can use a high pressure stream from a water hose and just rinse the bromeliads out every week. An additional option is to, if you have mosquitoes around your home and you want to find out the potential source of where these mosquitoes might be breeding, I always suggest looking into whether or not you have a local mosquito control program that services where you live. And if so, I encourage people to contact their local mosquito control program. And some programs will actually come to your house and investigate where the mosquitoes could be breeding. And some mosquito control programs even provide free mosquito fish for containers that you can't dump to serve as biological control of the mosquito larvae in those containers. So what I just wanted to end on is just letting you know that there's just a brand new UF IFAS Extension EDIS document out on this very topic, genetically modified mosquitoes, and it is available here at this link. If you want to look into this further, all you have to do is if you go to Google and type in Ask IFAS, IFAS, and then if you go to the Ask IFAS website and put in mosquitoes, you're going to get a range of different publications about mosquito control, and one of them being this publication on genetically modified mosquitoes. So I encourage you, if you want to do some additional reading, you can look at this publication. It also provides some additional resources that you can look into. A lot of the information that I provided in this talk actually came from Oxitec and the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District. And you can find out more about this. They actually are providing really frequent updates about how the different projects are going, the 2 pilot projects. And so if you want to see what's going on with the projects, I encourage you to check out this website here, thekeysmosquitoproject.com. And we're gonna, you'll have time to ask questions that I may not have answered in this presentation. And if you feel like you don't have enough time to have your questions answered, you're welcome to contact me at my email address listed here. But that's honestly all I have, because I did want to leave time for additional questions. So Shelly, I will probably stop sharing my screen now, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, that's up to you. Thank you so much. That was very informative. And I also just shared the link directly to that document, but there are several other documents in there as well on mosquitoes. So if you follow her instructions on how to get to those documents in the EDIS database, you'll be able to see some more information. So there are some questions. So we'll go start going through the chat. Some of these I think you answered in the course of speaking, but I'll ask some of them again if I'm not quite sure. Let's see.
Okay, and I've got the chat pulled up here.
I think you answered this, but there's been a few different questions around the idea, concerned about, if other animals, birds or fish, or I would say bats, whoever, are eating the mosquitoes, like, is there any chance that they would be affected?
So what I like, the way I explain this is, when let's say you eat something, let's say that I eat fish, I'm not going to, those genes from that fish, they're not going to be incorporated into my DNA. The way that what happens is when you eat something, your body completely digests it, and you have enzymes in your body that are called DNases. And so they actually completely break down the food that you're eating. They completely break down the DNA. And so then what happens is your body, breaks everything down into these very simple amino acids, and then your body is able to rebuild them into what you need. So that's the same thing that's going to happen when an animal eats this mosquito or a genetically modified mosquito. That's how I like to try and explain it. So I hope that is helpful.
Yes, thank you. Diane asked a question, but I don't quite understand it. She asked, wouldn't it be better to stop using pesticides?
So there's always going to be a need for pesticides in control of mosquitoes. We can utilize these other tools, but when you have infected mosquitoes flying around during an active outbreak of a mosquito-borne pathogen, it's going to be the goal of any mosquito control program. And I think, anyone that's in the area is going to have the same feelings about this. The goal is going to be to try and kill those flying mosquitoes before more people can potentially be infected with these pathogens. And so that is where chemical or pesticides are always going to be a part of the control process. And additionally, the larvicides that I talked about, they're pesticides as well, but they have reduced effects. So as I mentioned, there are certainly the best program for controlling mosquitoes is one that's going to be one that incorporates multiple tools. So yes, it would be so awesome if everybody all the time goes around and empties their containers every single week, but that's not reality. It's really not. So there is always going to need to be the use of pesticides. I wish maybe there wouldn't be, but most mosquito control programs have outreach to try and speak to the public and try and get them to help to reduce all these larval habitats around their homes so that they can reduce the amount of pesticides. But unfortunately, it's never enough. So yes, if you want there to be less pesticides, then I encourage you to, be an advocate of dumping out containers, tell your friends so that there might be less pesticides that are needed. That's my suggestion for that.
Okay, thank you. So there's an interesting question from Jacopo about, wants to know if there's a chance basically that the friendly mosquitoes could react to the genetic selective pressure and adapt themselves. That's a big question, maybe.
So only the male mosquitoes are being released and the male mosquitoes don't bite. So that's the answer.
So there's no way for them to genetically modify over time.
Male mosquitoes just start biting?
Yeah, that's the question.
No.
Okay. Alicia wants to know if they go back and collect the plastic boxes post-release so that they're not adding to the coastal plastic trash problem.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And so have there actually been a reduction or elimination in insecticide treatments in some areas where they have released the mosquitoes?
So the particular studies in the Florida Keys, these pilot projects, they're just underway right now. I'm not positive about all of the prior studies that have taken place. That's just not information I have. Sorry.
And there's a couple of questions, I think I know the answer to this, but there's a couple of questions about if mosquitoes can interbreed with other mosquito species.
No, they cannot.
All right.
Well, I should say, it is, this is kind of, it gets complicated. It is possible for the yellow fever mosquito and the in areas where there's been recent introductions of the Asian tiger mosquito, it is possible for there to be some matings between the Asian tiger mosquito and the yellow fever mosquito. However, there is no viable offspring that's a result of the matings. And actually, the yellow fever mosquito used to be widespread throughout the state of Florida, but now it is its distribution is in South Florida, Central Florida, and it's in some urban areas in North Florida, and it's possible that its distribution is expanding further north, but it's thought that one of the reasons that the population of the distribution of the yellow fever mosquito in Florida is smaller than what it was in the past was actually due to the invasion of the Asian tiger mosquito and those two species mating and them not producing viable offspring. And so that led, actually, it's thought that it may have led to a little bit of reduction in the population of the yellow fever mosquito. So no viable offspring, that's the take home message. Yay.
All right, thank you for answering that. Frank wants to know if why the populations in the previous trials were not reduced by 100%.
I think, there's always going to be, with this mosquito species, yes, its flight is limited, its flight distance is limited, but there's always the possibility of immigration and migration. So it's possible that some additional mosquitoes may have flown in to that area, which led to an addition to the population, which may have led to their not being completely 100% reduction. That would be my guess.
Okay, thank you. And has this method been used to help with the stop of malaria?
So I'm going to be honest, I focus on issues related to Florida when it comes to mosquitoes. So I am not up to date on that type of information and how it's being used to possibly with Anopheles mosquitoes that transmit the pathogen that causes malaria.
Okay, and Lawrence has a very practical question. What are mosquito dunks or bits and where do you get them?
Great question. So as I said, they're going to be products that are made with BTI, which is which is a bacteria, and the bacteria spore is actually just going to kill mosquito larvae and midge larvae, and you can find them at different box stores. You can find them. The mosquito dunk looks like a little donut, and then the mosquito bits are just little pellets, and you can find them at Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart. You can certainly find them on Amazon. There's certainly a great option for killing mosquito larvae in containers that you may not be able to dump, such as bird baths. And they usually last about 1 month, so you only have to reapply once a month.
Okay, thank you. So we have another 8 minutes to keep answering questions, so we still have some more to get through. While we're doing that, I am going to launch a poll really quick. It's just 4 really short questions. Just basically, if you learned anything today. So go ahead if you can answer that, and we'll keep going. Are there any plans for a viewing-friendly infographic on this topic in both English and Spanish?
I think that's an incredible suggestion, and I thank you for it. So I will talk with my colleagues and see what we can come up with. Thank you for that suggestion.
Great, thank you. There's a comment about the EDIS document not working. The link I put in there, it works for me, so I'm not sure what to tell you about it saying it's an error. But ultimately, if you go to the EDIS website and look for mosquitoes, you'll be able to find them, even if it's not working for you at the moment. Let's see. Lee said they have earth boxes for vegetables. Can mosquitoes live in the reservoirs?
I've actually heard that yes, earth boxes can serve as habitats for mosquito larvae. So that might be something to look into. I'm not super familiar with the construction of them, but I want to say that there might be some parts of it that are able to hold water. So, what you can do, so mosquito larvae, they go through different instars or phases as they grow. And so, yes, when they first hatch out of the egg, they're super tiny. You may not be able to see them, but over time they get larger. So, I encourage you to, look in this, maybe containers that might hold water and see if you can see the larval mosquitoes. They look like, some people call them worms. They'll just kind of wriggle in the water. You can do a quick YouTube search of what mosquito larvae look like in the water if you're unfamiliar. And then I encourage you to investigate around your home to see if that's something that is happening.
Okay, thank you. Lewis asked, what government body, if any, regulates the introduction of GM mosquitoes or other animals to the wild?
So this, that's a great question. And so genetically modified mosquitoes were potentially, so Oxitec was interested in potentially releasing genetically modified mosquitoes in the Florida Keys in 2010. So this has been a project that has been in the works for over 10 years. And one of the reasons why it's taken so long for the releases to happen is because there were questions about what government agency should regulate this. So initially it was the FDA, but they weren't sure. It was, and so the FDA eventually gave it over to the EPA. And yes, so it's regulated by the EPA. And the EPA, this has all been approved by the EPA. They did rigorous investigations of all the proposed methods. And you can certainly look at all the documents that were submitted to the EPA and also the EPA's findings. You can find all of this information. Just do a Google search and look up EPA Oxitec mosquitoes. So it's out there. I encourage you to look into it.
Okay, thank you. So I want to make sure to get to a couple more questions. We just have a few minutes. There was two different questions, but they're kind of related. One is if there's any plans to extend the release of the GM males in other areas in Florida. And then someone also asked if there's any work being carried out to do this with other nuisance mosquito species.
So I can tell you, because this is such a highly regulated process, and it is under such scrutiny by the EPA, that it takes years for any type of release like this to happen, because the approval does take so long. So I can tell you that there is absolutely, at this moment, no other plans for this to occur in Florida. California is looking into this. And so, no, at this time, these are the only two pilot projects that are taking place in Florida. And as I mentioned, this mosquito species has a very small flight range. So genetically modified mosquitoes that are released in the Florida Keys, they're going to be in the Florida Keys. And that's actually most likely another one of the benefits of performing these pilot projects on the Florida Keys, is because they are islands. And so the populations are going to be restricted to those islands.
Okay, one really great question from Ken. What can extension agents do to help you teach others about GMO mosquitoes?
Oh. What would you like to do, Ken? What can we come up with? You know I love working with you.
Yeah, there's quite a few agents on here, so this is your chance.
Okay, what do you guys want to do? Do you want, we could do, I can share this presentation with you. If you would like to give this presentation to folks, I'm at your disposal. So you tell me what you think would be beneficial, and I'm certainly happy to provide you with resources that you think would be helpful.
Great, thank you. So I think we got through the majority of the questions. A lot of the remaining comments were responses back to other people's questions and comments. So thank you so much for everyone for kind of helping fill in some of the gaps there and providing suggestions on where to purchase different products that we've been talking about. And I'll save this chat for you as well, so that you can go back and if you want to provide information for people later. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Unless, do you see any questions there that you just need to answer? I think we really covered most of the questions.
I'll quickly answer. I saw this question twice. Is this the same mosquito that spreads Zika? Yes. It spreads Zika, it spreads chikungunya, it spreads dengue, it spreads yellow fever. So it is certainly very negative, has a very negative impact on human health. And it also can transmit dog heartworm. So it can also have negative impacts on the health of our pets.
Wow. Well, there's the final word. This mosquito we maybe don't really want around. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. Again, this program the recording will be available on the blog post. It will be probably a week or two. So if you have any other questions, feel free to contact Dr. Buckner directly.
Absolutely.
Let me know if you didn't get her contact info and I will send it to you. Go on to EDIS and get the information that's on there that's available to everyone. So thank you everyone. And thank you, Dr. Buckner, again. This was really great.
Thank you all for your interest, and please contact me if you have more questions.